Hey everybody, welcome to Botanical Monogram with Procreate. First we're going to choose our canvas size. I like to choose about 3,500 or 4,000. 3,500 gives me 12 layers for my iPad size. And I've gone ahead and made a palette that I think is pretty. I've got some reds, blues, and greens. And I'm going to make that my default. So first we need to insert our letter. So I'm going to do an S for Sabrina. And I'm just going to use that ENA 01 and bold and capitalized. And I'm going to increase the size of it and change it to a gray so that we can see it. Okay, center it on your canvas. Now we're going to work below the letter, and first I'm going to choose the red. And with my watercolor brush kit, I'm going to choose the Wet on Wet Blend Grainy for the petals. Works really well. And just make messy petals. Okay, I'm going to make some flowers with 4 petals, and you can go over each petal as many times as you need. You just do a light pressure to make the blend. Okay, I'm going to show you a little trick I like to do with the petals. So select that layer and then go up and change your brush to the dark edge bleed. And then you can just simulate like pools of watercolor on each petal. And it kind of just looks like it's pooled up, and don't be scared to go pretty dark on here if you like. Alright, there's also the Bleeding Wash Painter, which does like little speckles, almost like a salted look. And this one works when you make your color a little bit darker, or when you do like a really pigmented, really like light color. So let me try dark. And I just kind of dot around. Okay, time for the stamen. I'm going to choose a really dark color and our Useful Streaks brush. And I'm also going to do this on a separate layer. And you just pull it out like at the middle of the flower. Real quick, nothing fancy. Okay, I'm going to lay down some really deep green petals. And for this one, there's a couple brushes I can go to. I do like to use the opaque Wet on Dry. And that's really good for stems. And it gives you a really dark look. So I'm just going to draw out some messy leaves. And for this one, it's best to do it all in one sweep instead of going over it, because it is like a Wet on Dry if you go over it. Okay, let's try the grainy brush just for a different look for a couple of the leaves. Okay, now you want to select that layer and go back up to your dark edge bleed. With the same green still selected, we're going to just go over all of our leaves and make them really dark. And you want to leave them a little like pooled or speckled looking. So So just like we did with the petals, I'm gonna go back and do that bleeding wash painter over some of them to get that like salted speckled look. I'm going to stay on the same petal layer, and I'm going to choose blue and go back with the blend, the grainy blend, and now I'm going to do some blue flowers. So I do like to keep all my petals on the same layer, the dark leaves on the same layer, and then I'm going to do some other floral leaves on a different layer. So if they match, I usually keep them on the same layer. Okay, back up to our leaf and stamen layer, and we're going to grab that useful streaks, paint in some of those real quick. Now back to the petal layer and back on the blue. I kind of go back and forth and select that layer, and then I'm going to do my effects now and do my dark edge bleed on all the leaves and then the paint wash. So this is an example of what I was saying before. When you get a really bright blue and do that painter wash, it just adds a really cool effect to the centers, and you just dab around. Okay, so I'm going to add another layer, do some more leaves. You could just keep doing them on the same leaf layer, but I kind of finalized all those, and so I'm going to just make a new layer to keep them a little bit separate. All right, select a layer and let's add some effects. So it's pretty much the same process this whole time. Just keep adding your effects to each layer. Okay, so now it's time for some longer leaves or fern looking leaves. I do like to use the opaque wet on dry or the wet on dry stroke. I'll show you both of them. So there's the wet on dry stroke and here's the opaque. There's a big difference, but if by combining both of them and using them differently, again, you get some different effects. So here we're going to do some opaque first, and just kind of use pressure. So drag them out like and do pressure and then less pressure to get the tip. And make sure you're making them come out of your letter, and just work from each side, like do some on the top, do some on the bottom, left, right, keep it balanced. Okay, I'm going to switch over to a lighter green and that wet on dry stroke. And let's do some different leaves. Maybe that more that are like rounded. Just pull these out. These are it's a lot softer brush, so you're going to see the edges look a little bit like it's bleeding into paper. One of my favorite brushes is the wet on wet blend. And this one really responds to pressure also, so it as you release your pressure, it blends really nicely. So here's an example. I'm just gonna draw something out here, and you just see how it kind of disappears, so you control the pressure of it. So this one, I do have a darker color selected because it's such a light brush. And I'm going to do this on a separate layer, just keep it from getting too crazy. Let's do some long, rounded fern type. Okay, it's time to select my S and turn it to white. I'm going to make a layer that's falls right below the text layers, and I'm going to choose a light gray. And brush type will be the wet soft blend. And we're just going to shade kind of around the letter so that it gives it a little bit of shadow, because the white is blending a little bit too much. Once you have a little bit of shadow on there, move that layer all the way to the bottom so it's underneath all the leaves. Okay, I'm just going to do a little bit more of a touch up, select certain layers and do some effects on top of them to make sure they look pretty good. Alright, so once you've applied all the effects that you want to, and you're satisfied, you go ahead and grab a pencil tool and write the name that corresponds right underneath the letter. And here's the final result. Looks beautiful. And I did apply a watercolor effect over the top with the watercolor rough brush with a light gray, and I set the blend mode to linear burn. And this also looks really beautiful printed on watercolor paper. If you did add a watercolor effect over the top, you would want to turn that off if you're printing, because you don't want a double effect. All right, thank you so much for watching, and if you do make something, please tag me at @stortdesign so I can see what you've got going on, and we'll see you next time.